There we go. All right. I don't know why that my noise cancellation had kicked out, so I had to restart it, which is really weird because it usually starts with the computer, and I haven't turned it off. But anyway, and now I'm like out of focus here. That's not good. So I should be focused. Let's see if it wants to refocus my camera. Turn the audio off. And yeah, that's not out of focus. That's just like bad frames. That looks like really low res. Let me check one of my other pages here. Hang on a second. Hang on a second. I'm sorry. You know, normally things are so smooth, and like right now, not smooth. I did have to start the day with a doctor's appointment early this morning, so you know I've got that going for me. Why does that not look good? I don't understand. That one looks fine. Okay, that one looks good. Everybody looks good so far. I'm gonna go down here and I'm moving my windows around. I don't know why Facebook didn't look very good, but it's Facebook, and Facebook just does what it wants to do. Twitch looks great. Um, Twitch is fine. All right. Hey, good morning, Rescue Mini. Was that Mini Pins? I rescue Mini Pins. Oh, Mini Pins are awesome. I used to have full-size pins, as people are like mini pins. Miniature pinchers. I had full-size Doberman pinchers, and Dobermans are awesome. Sorry, I had to fix some stuff and focus and everything and audio and whatever. But anyway, I think we're good now. Let me just get my windows lined up here and get everybody in the right place so I can see all of the yeah, the latency on the Facebook page is garbage. I'm not sure what's up with that, but anyway, you know what? It's Facebook. All I need to do is see the text coming in from the chat, and that will be that. So anything else I don't really care about. All right. Everything seems to be in the right spot now, and everything is working. I can see all of my chats. You all can hear me now, which is good because my microphone software was not functioning when I first fired up. I thought, oh, well, you know, I'll just kick right into me sanding something and then I'll fire it up and it'll be good. But of course, that's what always happens, is something stupid. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, before, when you couldn't hear me, is that I've got all the corners glued in now. You can see the corner pieces right here that support the sewing machine. So if I put this in here, I get my little model here, you can see that all of the bases are now in. The machines are sitting in there just like they're supposed to. They look really awesome. And I still have 3 of these that I need to pull out of clamps that I will do that in just a minute. They're over on the side over here, sitting in some clamps where I was gluing the corners in. And I took care of the rest of those yesterday. I started this process on Wednesday. So if you tuned in on Wednesday, you saw me cutting the corners down. Just cut triangular blocks of wood like this, and then cut them to the length that we need. Then I use little clamping jigs to put them into the corners, and they usually sit in the glue for at least a half a day. And so I started that process on Wednesday, and then I finished it off camera yesterday so you all wouldn't have to watch me just gluing all the time. And this morning, what I'm doing is I'm putting some of these into we're basically in the final stretch before we apply finish. And that means it's kind of the boring part, which is sanding. Sanding's not exciting, I know. It's one of those things, there's 2 parts of this process that I can't really enjoy ever. And that is sanding, because it's just sanding. It just takes a while to sand them. And I have to sand in multiple grits. So typically these are smooth enough I can start at 120. And there's a couple of them that I've had to start, like if there's some defect in the wood or whatever that I want to really work out, I'll start at 80. Usually I start at 120 grit. And then, I mean, I just use regular old sanding discs like this. This is a 120. Once the 120 is done, I step it up to a 150 and do all of the sides and the bottom and these top areas. I try, if it has a side compartment, I get the lid, both sides of the side compartment, and then I put it in here and then sand it again as it sits in the lid, just to make sure everything's kind of nice and flush. Once all of the sanding is done up to 150, then what I do is I take it over to my router table and I will put an 1/8 of an inch roundover on all of the edges, because it just makes them feel better. These are actually pretty sharp, and aside from giving it a nice shadow line when you set it on a table, it gives it a nice shadow line along the bottom. It just gives it a nice feel when you go to pick up the base. The other thing I actually have to do with all of these is to break the edges on these handles right here. They're pretty sharp also, because I cut these on my CNC machine. And so when I do these handles, I leave them till the very end, and then I will get sandpaper and I have to break these edges by hand, because I can't get a roundover in there to do the job. So typically I will break these by hand once I have the roundovers in, and I wait till after I do the 150, because if I do the roundover before the 150 removes enough material that it will change the profile of that little 1/8 inch roundover. So I do the 1/8 inch roundover after the 150, and then I move on to some 220. And typically on the 220, I'm not going to use the hand sander. I'm going to just put that on a sanding pad like this. I've got these little, like, they call them sanding mouse, because it looks kind of like a computer mouse. And I will generally put that on here and run it lengthwise along the grain. And my purpose in doing that is to take out any of the last swirl marks from that 150. A lot of times, depending on the wood species especially, you can get pigtails, little swirls, because this doesn't just go around, it also oscillates. And that oscillating motion along with that spin can create pigtails, which are not particularly attractive once you apply finish. They're hard to see when it's bare wood like this, but once you start putting finish on, the pigtails can become apparent, and you don't want that. So no one likes pigtails except other pigs. So I just finished this one at 120, I believe. Yeah, so this is 120. This is I've done these two already sanded. So this one right here is a sapele. It's been sanded to 150. This is a quarter sawn white oak, which is very cool looking. And all these will look 100 times better once there's actually some finish on them. This is a figured maple. So this is going to be a very beautiful base right here. This one's actually spoken for. Somebody sent me a message and said, hey, that maple base you're working on, can I have that one when it's done? And I said, sure, why not? That's kind of the whole point of this, is to sell them, right? So if I've already got it pre-sold, that's awesome. I don't like to do special orders, because it puts time constraints on me and obligations that if I can't meet them during expectations of when I think I'll be done and everything, I feel bad, and I don't like people having to wait on me for stuff. So I usually don't do special orders. I do get people asking for different size bases. Like, these are for full-size machines, which is this is what I consider a full-size machine. I think this is a 115. I can't remember. I think the 115 has the 3 holes right here. Anyway, there's multiple machines that are this size, that have this size base to them. The bed on them is a specific dimension, and they fit in these size bases. So you've got a model 66, which is probably the most produced of the old cast iron type machines from Singer. I think they made millions of those. But 66s, 201s, 15s, 115. There's a whole list of them, and I actually have a lot of them listed in the when I have the ad to sell them. They're in the ad. But anyway, that's a full size. There's also a what they call a 3/4 size machine, which is just kind of take this and shrink it down by about a quarter. And it's called a 3/4 size machine. There's several models of that. I have had multiple requests to do some 3/4 bases. So probably in the next batch of bases that I make, I'll throw a few of the 3/4 size ones in there just to satisfy those people who've been asking. I've had 2 or 3. How many bases I make at one time depends. Right now I have 8 in process, and it just depends on how much wood I have on hand and how much of the necessary pieces I can get out of the raw stock that I have. I don't necessarily go into my wood guy thinking, okay, I'm going to build 7 bases, so I've calculated I need exactly this much wood. I don't normally do it that way. I go in, I look at the boards that are there, and I'll see a piece of wood, and I'll be like, oh, that's really cool. And then I check it for its dimension to see, okay, I can get, like this board right here, I can get 3-inch wide boards out. Most of these are 3 inches thick. So I'm like, yeah, I can get 3-inch wide boards out of this. Well, how long is it? And how many boards do I think I can get out of this piece of wood because it's really pretty? And that's kind of how I go about it. It's not really scientific. I just make sure that whatever I walk out with, I can get complete bases out of. If I find a bunch of boards or some different varieties, like sometimes I'll go in and I'll see like the sapele. I walked in and there was some really beautiful sapele in a stack, and I was like, ooh, that's really nice, and let me get some and make some out of there. And I saw some of these flame maple boards, and I'm like, ooh, those will be really cool for some stuff. The white oak stuff, these may be my last white oak bases. I hope not, but the place I get the white oak from, they don't normally carry a lot of stock. The one place I normally go to get wood, they don't carry white oak. They carry, excuse me, red oak. They do not carry white oak just because I guess white oak these days is kind of a pain. And getting it, it doesn't stay in stock very long because a lot of cabinet makers and such like to use the quarter sawn white oak. So, and it's expensive these days. Wood, if you haven't known, is very expensive. Not just 2x4s, but basically all wood products have gone up in price. So, I may not buy as much as I would previously. So it just depends. But I'll probably in a couple of weeks make a trip to my lumber guy. It's usually takes me about an hour to get there and an hour back, and then however long I wander around. So it eats up a good part of my morning. But I don't do special orders. I will do requests, like if I get a few people looking for a specific size base that is either the 3/4 or the full size, I will try to accommodate those requests, but I don't do special orders. Like I said, I just don't like to be obligated to a project, because even these, like if I want to take a week off and not work on them, I don't have anybody going, oh, is my base done yet? So I don't want that. I used to do that, but not anymore. And like I said, it was just one of those things where I was putting pressure on myself to do these things and not allowing myself the flexibility to move around and do other things. So, and I got a question that says, did you cut the base out on the CNC? Looks like one piece frame, or is it 4 sides? So basically the way these are constructed is, well, to answer your question, part of it is done on the CNC. These are not milled out of a giant log kind of thing on the CNC. These are actually 4 pieces of wood. I will cut the sides, and I cut the front and the back pieces. So you get 4 pieces. This one might be a little easier to explain because it doesn't have the side compartment. But I'm generally working with a front and a back and 2 sides, and they get cut to 3 inches, and then I mill them down to 3/4 of an inch thick. Then I create the joints on them. Before I do that, I actually go to the CNC machine and put in, go over here, and put in the handles. I used to do this on my router table, but I have since moved to doing these cutouts on my CNC. And generally what I will do is take the two boards that are the side pieces. These aren't sides, but I'll just use this as a demonstration. I'll take the two boards and I put them together on the platform of the CNC machine. And then the machine has a setup in there where it actually cuts at the same time. It'll cut the handle out of both pieces. So when I pull them apart, I have pieces that look like this. And that's what I do on the CNC machine. The other thing I do on the CNC is a lot of these have a carving on the front, which is the old Singer logo with some flourishes on the side. It's my little special touch. But anyway, the decorative carving I also do on the CNC machine. All of the other cutting is done on the table saw or on my compound miter saw. So basically 4-piece construction. The bases that have the side compartments, I generally just take a base like this and I cut it. These pieces right here cut a little bit longer, about 4 inches longer, 4.5 inches longer. And then I cut another piece right here that goes in and acts as this, well, it's easier to see right there, acts as this dividing wall between the storage base and the regular compartment. And this is just a dado cut in this sidewall. I do a dado that fits this piece of wood and it fits in there. And then all the other stuff like the tops and stuff, there's a whole story about how I made the tops and stuff. So if you go back and look at some of my other live streams, they're titled so that you can find the bases and stuff. And you're very welcome. I'm glad I could answer that for you. So yeah, they're not overly complicated. I mean, these are the construction of them is pretty simple. I don't do like some people will cut a slot and slide these bottoms in. I don't bother doing that. This is just a bit that I use on my router table to cut basically a ledge in here. It's called a rabbet. And well, actually you can see it closer because there's another rabbet cut in here to hold this lid. So if you look, there's basically just a route right here where that lid goes. That same route is done all the way around the bottom. And I cut the plywood out and round the corners over, and that gets glued in. This just sets in, so it's a gravity thing. But I don't do like complicated bottoms. The bottoms are not load bearing. There's no weight that actually gets, or very little weight that goes on here. These sewing machines actually set on these triangular blocks. So if you look on the corners, there are these triangular blocks that are cut out, and these are actually glued into the sidewalls, and that is what holds up the machine. So there's no load bearing on the bottom, so I don't have to get fancy with the bottoms of them or anything. So it's pretty simple construction. Even these joints right here, this is done just the same way they used to make these bases for these machines like 120 years ago. It's very simple construction. There's no crazy joints or anything. Sometimes I get fancy and will do things like, hang on, I think I have one over here. So sometimes I'll do fancy stuff, like I'll do dovetail joints. So here's let me do it on the side camera so you can see it. So here's a nice dovetail joint right here, and you can see it looks like this. I like using contrasting wood. This is all the same wood, and so the joint doesn't always show up as well when you're using the same kind of colored wood here. And but sometimes I will do fancier joinery like dovetail joints, but generally speaking, I just use my standard stock process and it works really well. And they're sturdy, and that's the big thing. These are very sturdy. They're time tested. I glue them. My glue sets for at least a day, so that it's super cured and super strong. And yeah, I started off. Somebody sent me a picture. Actually, it's the woman who wanted this and sent me a picture. And she had made one. She's like, I made it out of 2x4s and a Dremel and whatever. And I was like, well, everybody starts somewhere. And I'm pretty sure the first one I made for my wife was kind of similar, just like, Home Depot kind of wood and an old saw. And So you don't have to get super complicated. It's just I take mine up a few levels in terms of, you know, how nice they look and everything else. So, and that just makes me, gives me the ability to sell them at a higher price point because they do look really pretty when they're done. But anyway, so what we're doing now though is we're doing the very boring bits, which is sanding these things down, getting them down to that 150, and then I will go over to the router table and just give all these edges a nice round over and give them a final sand. I'm not going to do all 8 of them on screen for you today because that's just boring as hell. It really is. It bores me to death. I don't want to bore you to death. By the time I'm back here on Monday, I will actually be ready to apply finish on these, and I've got 4 different types of wood, so I'm going to be applying 4 different finishes on these. Each wood species gets its own different type of finish. I talked about this a little bit last week. The maple is probably the most complicated of all of them because I have to dye stain the wood, and then once the wood is dye stained, then I have to sand off the dye stain, and then I will dye stain it again and sand that off. And what that does is this actually has some really beautiful figure in here that you can't really see without the stain in there. The stain only goes into certain parts of the wood and really makes it pop, and then you're sanding off the surface wood back to its original color so that you're left with all the figure showing on here, which is really what you want with figured maple. And then I put a protective coat on top of that, and then I lacquer these things, and then that's that. So this is the most complicated. Probably the easiest is going to be like the sapele. I will probably do like a teak oil finish on these, which I just put the teak oil on, put a couple of coats of that on, let that cure, and then top coat it with lacquer. The oak gets a, what is it, mahogany gel stain, which I find works the best with oak, and it looks really gorgeous when it's done, but I let that cure for a few days after I wipe off the stain. You let it cure, and then those get top coated with lacquer. And then the cherry, I've got a couple of cherry bases, and they get a coat of, it's an oil-based stain. It's a really super dark called Kona, but because it doesn't soak in all the way into the cherry, it just gives it this really kind of a warm brown, kind of like an antique furniture brown color, which is really nice. I let that cure, and then that gets top coated. So everything gets a top coat of lacquer. I just use this Watco rattle can stuff, which reminds me I need to buy more of that. Walmart is your best choice for if you're looking for that stuff. It's the crystal clear lacquer. I like the semi-gloss. It's hard to find, but I think it gives the nicest, most natural. It's not super glossy, and it's not matte. And so I like that kind of in between. Kind of looks like furniture polish, like it's a waxed surface. So that's kind of the look I like. And I don't like my wood to feel plasticky. Like I don't use polyurethane because it just, to me, it has a plasticky feel. I don't like that. So lacquer is my go-to choice for a top coat. And then they cure for like a week because you need to let the lacquer cure all the way out. And then they're basically good to be sold. So that's kind of my process. But to get to there, we have to go through this painful part, which is the sanding. I've already taken this to 120. I've got a couple little gouges on this thing. They're not gouges, they're just little marks on here. I am probably going to fill those just so that when I do the staining on here, they'll blend in. They're not going to stand out because I'm going to do that. But I'm going to do that right now and let this sit. So I have basically, I'm going to go back into my cabinet back here, and I've got this stuff called plastic wood. And this is what they would refer to as a natural color on this one. So here's the plastic wood. I'll show you on here. It's just this made by DAP. And I'm just going to fill in just a couple of these little areas here. And I actually have a little piece of wood I could use for this. And I'm just going to get a little bit of this out of here and press it into that little void, and then this will get sanded off. This stuff dries pretty quickly. I could try to sand out these little things, but then you start denting the wood almost. I mean, you don't want to dent the wood with, you'll be able to feel it. It's like, oh, it's like a groove in there where you had to apply so much pressure from that sanding. And I don't want that. I just want this to be smoothed out. So this should fill in those two little voids there. I think they're pretty natural, but sometimes you get that in wood. And it depends on the wood species as to how you can fill those. This stuff can be, you can color this stuff if you want to. So if you've got a darker wood like a mahogany or something, I could definitely put a little bit of stain in here and color that, mix it up and color that. Right now you can see, whoops, you can see it's just like those two little spots on there. That'll dry to actually a lighter color. And then once that's dry, I will hit it with some sandpaper and that will be good to go. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this aside for the moment and let the filler harden. I'm trying to figure out which side is the side that goes in here. I did a really good job on this. It's like, which way does this go? Is that right? No, I think it's the other way. It fits better one way than the other, and that would be that way. So I'm going to set this aside over here. And then I'm going to grab another base that needs to be sanded right here. And we can go ahead and start sanding on this one. So this has my little cover there. I'll take that out. And what I'm going to do is just grab a new piece of 120 sandpaper. I could probably use the one I've got out, but especially because this is white oak, I really want something that has a really good cutting surface to it as far as sandpaper goes. And then what I'm going to do is I got a pen right here, right? I'm going to write 120 on here. Like, why do you write 120? Well, the reason is when they get this dusty on the back, you can't read the grit anymore. And then 150 starts to feel like 120 and vice versa. So if I use a pen, then I can easily see it. It doesn't get covered in dust quite as bad. So I'm going to take this one off. Yeah, like this one's 120 and it's almost unreadable in terms of what's printed on the pad, but I can always read it up there. So I save these and I use them for hand sanding and such. But I'm going to put a new one on here because, like I said, the oak is pretty hard wood in terms of wood hardness. This is about as hard a wood as I use. I've got some red oak that's probably about this hard, and then walnut. I don't think walnut's as hard as this. You'd have to go look at the Janko scale. There's something called a Janko scale for hardness. But anyway, it's very hard. All right, I'm going to get my ears on here. Hopefully my noise cancellation is working and you won't have to be subjected to the loud noise because I turn on my dust collection. I have this hosed in to my vacuum system, so you can see the hose right here. And then I turn the vacuum on and the sander, so it does get a little loud from my perspective. Hopefully from yours, it'll just be annoying, but not loud. So here we go. I was just going to point out one thing while I'm doing this. When I do the roundovers, I did the roundovers with a router bit. And when I do the roundovers, it has a tendency, I'll show you on this side, it has a tendency because this is all end grain right here. It's like straight grain, but then it cuts into that end grain and it leaves these surfaces kind of rough. So even though it's a nice smooth roundover, you don't get the smoothest of cuts here. So I really take a couple of extra passes with the sandpaper to get this round over so that it is much smoother and much nicer looking. So that's kind of my end goal, is to smooth that out. So it starts off like this, kind of rougher looking, and then ends up more like this, which is much smoother. So I just wanted to point that out. When you see me kind of going over the top of it like this, I'm working that round over to get it nice and smooth and to really work on that end grain, because that is a pain in the rear, that end grain. Oh, I gotta love the little spammy comments sometimes in Twitch. Twitch. Always with the spam. No, thanks. I don't want to be TikTok famous or Twitch famous or TikTok famous for that matter. I think I'm good. All right. So that was the 120. I switched over to a 150 here. And actually, I'm just going to take a stiff brush and clean out the sandpaper here a little bit. It just kind of unclogs some of the grit there and gives you a fresher surface. So you saw I did all the sides. I don't spend a lot of time on the bottom because I don't want to change the flatness of this. This has already been flattened, and if I sand too long on there, it might make it not flat, which is bad. So I do all four sides. I work those edges, get these nice and round. Like I said, it pays to spend a little extra time on these corners because wherever you have this open end grain on the edges, right here and on the other side, those will get stained darker. So if you sand them a little bit more, that closes off those pores a little bit and keeps the stain a little bit more even across. Then I do the top and the bottom of the lid, and then I put the lid in, and then I give it another pass and try to make sure that it's very flush with the sides here. Once I do that though, basically I just start all over again and hit it with the 150. The 150 doesn't take as long. Pardon me, I'm working with one hand here. The 150 doesn't take as long because I've already taken a lot of the marks out that I needed to with the 120. So with the 150, I'm just getting rid of the 120 marks. It's kind of like each progressive grit gets rid of the scratch marks from the grit before. So there's not hopefully a lot of 120 marks in here, but we'll go ahead and get this done. And then I think I'll go back to that piece of maple. We'll sand that down, and then we'll go and do some edge routing just to smooth those corners, kind of mix things up a little bit. I've got more bases to come out of the clamps, but we'll go ahead and start with these. So let's do some 150 on here just to get this cleaned up. Now one more bit. All right, that is with the 150. There's different sanding philosophies out there, and you'll find a lot of different information about how to sand your projects and things like that. I find this is the best way for myself, but it doesn't necessarily suit everybody's projects and the finish that everybody wants. Some people will actually stop after each grit, like after you do the 120, and then they will take a piece of 120 and straight sand across. And then they'll go do a 150 and then straight sand across. I don't do that. I also don't, some people will take their projects up to like 400 grit. I find that's a little too much for me because I want the color to get down in the wood. The more you sand, it's like the more you're burnishing the surface of that wood and closing off those pores and not allowing any color to seep into the wood. Now, this particular species of wood right here is going to have a gel stain. Gel stain sits on top of the wood. So it's not really as critical as like the cherry, which cherry, this color soaks into the wood fibers. So it depends on the wood you're finishing and the finish stuff you're using as to how much you want to soak in. Like I said, I spend a little extra time on the corners here on the end grain to try to close those off and keeps anything from soaking in there and making those look darker than the rest. But anyway, that's kind of my philosophy. I don't do the straight sanding until it's actually the last thing I do, and I don't put a 220 grit on here normally. Some like the cherry I probably will because it's softer, and I might do it on the maple because it's a little softer as well. I won't do it on the sapele and I won't do it on the oak. I'll just use a straight sanding motion on a mouse pad like this and sand those straight. The other ones being a little bit softer wood, they're a little bit more prone to scratching. And that being said, I want to make sure that any scratches are removed prior to doing my my staining or coloring. So on those particular items, I might actually go ahead and do a 200 with the disc sander and then flat sand them as well. So let me see if this is dry enough yet. Feels pretty dry. Sounds dry. I think we could probably hit this with the 150. We finished this one. I stopped this one at 120. So we still have to do the 150 on here. This is going to look so, I know you can't really see that, but when this gets a finish put on there, that is going to look so cool. It really is. But that being said, let's go ahead and do the 150 on here. It won't take long because, like I said, this is a softer wood. The softer the wood is, the less sanding, the less time it takes to sand them. So let's go ahead and get this one done. Once this is done, we'll go ahead and set up the table to do that 1/8 inch round over, and we'll kind of cruise through those and show you what they look like. And yeah, and that'll be a nice kind of transition thing. Once I do those, maybe I'll break the other ones out of the clamps so you can see how they were clamped up and what they look like coming out of the clamps, which is really not that exciting, but you know, I got nothing else for you. All right, let's do this. All right, that should do it for this one, which looks really nice. And what in the world? Just things are blowing up on here. All right, nothing important though, at least in my world. All right, this feels good. Everything else feels great. So this is now done to 150. I worked those corners really well. The front portion that I filled, I don't even know if you can see those or not. Let me put it back here and see. Right over here, there was a couple of, let me see if I can find them. There's a couple little spots right here, and I filled those in, and they're really hard to see now, which is kind of what I wanted, right? Hopefully, when I put the stain and stuff on here, they won't be evident after that as well. But soft wood, just a word of caution, you have to be really careful with soft wood whenever you're making stuff with this, because it does dent so easily and scratch and everything else that even though maple is thought to be a hardwood, this is soft maple, because you get the you definitely get the figure out of soft maple, more out of the soft maple than the hard maple. And the softer maple, kind of, it's not as soft as like a pine or something like that, but it can scratch and dent and things much more so than like this stuff. I'd drop this on the floor and it probably wouldn't dent it. It's pretty hard. So you just got to be careful with it, and you know that this and like the cherry as well, especially before you get a top coat on here, it is easy to make some marks that are going to cause you problems. So this looks really good. I think I've got any trouble areas all cleaned up, and now all we need to do is take this over and make some soft round edges on there. So let's go ahead and move over to this space, which is my router table, which at the moment is kind of a mess. I've got stuff sitting all over it. I mean, I've been moving back and forth across the shop, doing different things in different areas, and sometimes things get a little crazy. And I've got, let me move this stuff back out of the way, like that. And we'll just clean the rest of these scraps and such off. These aren't scraps, these are clamps. These are scraps. And this is leftover triangular wood that I can use for bases that have yet to be made. So I'm going to stick these in my little scrap pile there for later days. And a piece of sandpaper that we don't need at the moment. All right. Pretty good shape now. We can go ahead and start, well, I've got tape here. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put in my roundover bit here. So this is, oh, you can't even see that, can you? I need to move my camera angle a little bit. Hang on just a second. Hang on a second. Let me get this. So you can sort of see it right there. That's that little black plate with the red circle in the middle of it. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit for you. There you go. This is my my router table, which is basically this end of my table saw. My table saw is right down here. So this is my router table that I have put into the side of my table saw, which is super handy. I have the bit in here that we used for the roundovers on the corners of the bases. So this right now, as you see popping up to the top, is a very large roundover bit. Absolutely not what we're going to be using for these edges. The nice thing is when I raise this all the way up, it locks the bit in place. So all I need to do is get the wrench and give this a little twist, And that's all she, there we go. So I will take this bit out. This is a 3.5 inch shank on a, I think this is a 1 inch is what that is. But anyway, you can see it's a very large radius on there. We're not going to be using that large of a radius. We are going to be using a very teeny tiny radius, which is right here. Let's see if I can show this to you. So this is what we're going to be using. This is an 1/8 inch roundover bit, and it will do the job quite well for us. Trying to see whose bit this is. Can't really tell whose this is. But what we do need to do is take this collet out, because this is a 1/2 inch collet made for these much chunkier 1/2 inch bits. And then we will put a 1/4 inch collet in, which is much more accommodating to these smaller bits. And it just depends on which bits you're going to use. I prefer, when I can, I like 1/2 inch collet bits. That 1/2 inch shank is very stout and not accustomed to a lot of vibration or anything else. So when I can use a bit that has a 1/2 inch shank, I like to. But that is not always practical, especially for small cuts like this. You know, you'd have a hard time finding a 1/2 inch shank with a 1/8 inch roundover. I mean, I'm sure they exist, but you'd also probably spend a lot more money on it. But we will lower this down, and then we need to put in a cover for the hole there, which I think this one should accommodate. Actually, you know what? I have a smaller one I think that will do the job. Well, maybe not. Nope, just a hair small. So let's go up one size. We will use this one, which is a 1 inch, I believe. And we'll put this in place and lock that in. And then we can lower this down to the exact place it needs to be. Now, the way I do that is I get a piece of wood with a nice sharp edge on it. I put that against, this is not plugged in, by the way, so I can touch the bit without fear of cutting my fingers off. Anyway, I put this against that edge of the blade. It's still sticking up. And I'm going to keep lowering this until the piece of wood, as that edge of the blade comes in, that piece of wood will slide right over top of that. When it slides right over top, I know that it is just right there. So it just slides over the top and should give me the perfect roundover. I will test it on this piece of wood as well, just to see that I get a smooth roundover on here. So what I need to do now is get my extension cord and plug it into the router bit. I have very limited power in my shop, so I do a lot of extension cord moving. The other thing I'm going to do is just take my my dust collection hose and just kind of put it up here on the table. I'll turn it on. It's not going to pick up a lot of stuff, but it just kind of keeps things from floating around in the air. And hopefully you have a pretty good view of that, of what I'm going to see here. Yeah, that's not too bad of a view. Let me readjust you here just a little bit, just so you can get a better view. Well, here I'll zoom in so you can see what I'm doing here. There you go. That's a little better. All right. That looks pretty good. So all I'm going to do is take this piece of scrap wood, run it across this bit right here, and see what the profile looks like. Make sure I don't have any lines in there. Like if the bit's a little too high, it might make a little bit of a line in here that I would have to sand out. So I want to make sure there's none of that going on. So we will give it a little test run before we bring over that first base. And I need to get my ear protection because it is loud. That is for certain. And I need my, whatever in the world did I do with it? I don't know what I did with it. I had my, there it is, my remote for my dust collector. Okay, here we go. I'm going to turn this on. I'm also going to adjust the speed of this up a little bit. It's probably set pretty low. The larger the bit, the lower the speed. So I'm going to adjust this a little bit lower on the speed, or a little bit higher, I mean. Okay, so I'll show you what I was talking about with that line. Let me see if I can show you this right here. So I just ran this through and you can see it did a nice job of, you can see there's a nice little round over on this corner now. But what I want you to see, and I don't know if you can, is right up here is a little bit of a line where that bit is just a little too tall and it's leaving just a little bit of a line there, which means I would have to do a little extra sanding. So what I'm going to do is lower this just a tiny bit more. I mean, just a fraction more. Once I get the handle in the right place. And make sure all right, I'm going to run one more test here. So that is the process for putting the roundovers on. And I didn't switch cameras. You didn't. Hopefully, I'll switch it to the next one. You'll see better. But anyway, when the roundover is on there, it gives it a nice edge all the way profile, all the way around here, all the way around. And then what I do is I actually put it on the inside of the base as well. The cool thing is that there's a guide wheel on there that keeps you from going too far in, right? It controls the cut so that it's right on the edge, but that guide wheel hits here. This area on this is too high, so this doesn't get rounded over, so the roundover ends right here as you're going into those triangles, and that just gives it a really cool kind of look. You can see a little bit better there. So you can see how that roundover just kind of starts and ends right here on these corners, and I just think that looks really cool. And plus it just feels, like I said, it feels really nice when you have those roundovers in there like that. So this one is rounded over. We can go back and do another one now. I'm going to do this one right here. I'm going to switch you to this camera so you get a better view, hopefully this time, of what I was talking about. Take the lid off of here, and we will go ahead and do this one. And there's not much to it. I can just kind of work my way through. After I got that adjusted, I went ahead and just made that cut. All I try to do is keep pressure down on the end that's near the cutting head, just so that it's running as flat as possible. Because this is not perfectly flat, so you can see I've got some tipping and such on here. So I just want to make sure that it's flat as it runs against the bit, and that gives me the best looking cut that I can get. So let's do this one. So hopefully you can see, I'm going to put this right here. You can see that right along the bottom here, I get this really nice shadow line on the bottom. So when it's sitting on a flat surface, it doesn't give you this. Well, here, I'll show you the difference. So here's no shadow line. It kind of very flat looking on there. This one though, with that roundover, you just get that nice little shadow line along the bottom there, and it just looks really nice. So speaking of this one, this is the last one here. It's already sanded. I believe, or no, I actually have one more sanded over here. So we've got 2 others sanded and ready for action here. So we'll do this little one right here. This one will be pretty quick. I'm just going to do, this has 3 areas. So I'll do the bottom, I do the outside of the top, and then the inside. So it should go pretty quickly. And it's a smaller one too. So let's go ahead and get this one done. You have all the all the bits that I use. This is probably my favorite because it's hard to screw this one up. It just does such a great job. Um, Last one here. Bring it over. And then I've got, like I said, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 more that are still, well, 3 in clamps and 1 over here that needs to be sanded. So 1 over here, you can't see that, but it's over there. And then 2 over there that you can't see, but they need to be sanded. The ones over there, they're on the floor. They need to come out of the clamps. So we will do that next. But let's get this one done. This is another oak. Alrighty. Back over here, you can see my tower of bases over here. These look great. Get those off my head for a moment. So we're like halfway, well, almost halfway done. The two things I need to do is I need to get sanding mouse, and now there's actually three things. Well, no, two. I need to find some 220 paper here if I've got some. I might need to pull one out. I'll probably pull out a fresh one here. Let me pull a fresh one out, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with these things. Let me look in the old drawer here. Let's see. I know I've got some 220 in here. There we go. Fresh 220. And for the before I do these right here, I'm going to get these three out of the way. I'm going to do this one. I'm going to sand this with 220 just because it's a softer wood. I'm going to sand this with the 220 with the sander. The other one's not so much, just this one. I am going to mark this as 220 too, so I can find it later. But I am going to put this on here and hit it really quickly with the 220, and that will hopefully give me a very nice surface for this particular wood to work with. And then once I'm done with that, I will take the 220 out of the sander and put it onto that sanding mouse pad and just kind of give it a last once over by hand. So you can see what I'm talking about doing there. So let me get this all situated here. Let's run this through this 220 really quickly, and then we can move on. All right, I won't need to do that again on those three. For those and this one right here, now what I'm going to do is put this 220 on this pad here. It's hook and loop, so it just grabs on really quickly. take this off. And all I'm going to do now is just go with the grain, just like this. And not super hard or anything. I'm getting stuff on the sandpaper here. I'm not going super hard. I'm just trying to work out any swirls, and I'm working these edges a little bit more, and then just going with the grain, just like this. Just with the grain, and that should give me a nice clean finish when I'm done. The other thing I'll do is I'll check those edges that I did with the 1/8 inch roundover, because sometimes just because you're running on the edge of a piece of wood, you don't always get a smooth cut. Sometimes you can get a little bit of a rough cut in places. So just to make sure, we will just check those roundovers really quickly by hand here. And that's the nice thing, is this is a little bit pliable, so you can just kind of softly run it across those roundovers. I'm not changing the profile or anything. I'm just taking any of the rough edges off those. And it does a really nice job of that. Once I'm done with this, I still have to do the handles. I don't do the handles with 220. It's just, it doesn't have enough bite. Usually I will use 120 to do the handles. They don't have to be buttery smooth because, well, they're handles. So if they have a little bit of a grip to them, that's okay, right? Because you want something to be able to grab onto. All right, that is pretty cool right there. Let's set this aside. And I'm going to do some final passes on this piece. Now, before these get finished, I will clean them with some naphtha, which is a kind of like a solvent, very similar to lighter fluid actually. But, ooh, that is so buttery soft now. But that is the process for getting these things kind of where they need to go, is to basically, oh, just checking to see. I think my son already left for work. He did. Ooh, I tell you, the dust from the maple is really, really light colored. I'll tell you what, as long as I'm working with the maple here, let me go ahead and switch this off to a 120 pad. So put this 220 over here. Let me grab a 120 here, one of the older ones. This is why I saved these, because it still has lots of good grit to it. And let's go ahead and do, let me put this down here. We're going to do the handles, and I'll just show you real quickly how I do the handles. Let's see, if I do this camera, you can sort of see. I'm going to change that a little bit for you. I just want to give you the best view here. I think we're going to be close to finishing out today, because a lot of this stuff, I'm not going to make you watch this over and over again, because honestly, I don't like to sand, so I'm pretty sure it's not thrilling for you to watch me sand. But I wanted to give you an idea of what the process is and how I go about doing it. I actually have to turn this over this way. So this is what I'm getting ready to smooth out right here, is this little edge right here, because it's pretty sharp. I take my 120 on my little mouse pad here, and I'm just going to work it about a 45-degree angle across that sharpest edge right here. So you can see that edge right there. And I'm just going to run this across here. Now, this sands pretty nicely. But all I'm doing, doesn't have to be super flat or anything. I am just breaking that edge so that it is more pleasant to the touch. And then I'm going to hit these edges right here. And this is why I like this, because I can use this as a little bit of a rounded edge to it. And I can use that to just break this edge right here, and then the same thing down here. is just break that edge. Just like that. And it doesn't have to be gorgeous. I mean, if I want to get the 220 and kind of soften it up a little bit, I can, and just kind of with my fingers, especially this wood, just to make it look a little bit nicer. But honestly, that feels 1,000 times better, and no one's gonna cut their finger on that. That's my big concern. I don't want anybody cutting their finger on a piece of wood, right? That's like a giant paper cut, right? So let's get this cleaned out. Get this one flattened down. Get these edges. I tell you, for like $5, man, these things are really nice. I got these at the woodworking show one year, and I've got 2 of them, and I use them all the stinking time. All the time for almost all of my hand sanding and like interesting little areas like this. They work really well. And yeah, I don't know what I would do without them because they're just really, really handy. So I'm just going to smooth this out with that 220 just a little bit, just to kind of make sure that I'm not scratching this exterior wood, basically. And yeah. So that is much smoother now. I'm going to show you the edge there. So hopefully you can see that that edge is now smoother, a little bit nicer to the touch. And that's pretty much all I have to do to that. This one is ready for finishing. I don't have to do a thing left to this one. It is ready. My goal is to get the rest of these in that same condition. So what I would do is take my 220 here and put it back on my mouse pad. And then, like I said, the one thing you can do with these things is get yourself a stiff brush. Get a stiff brush like this and just kind of clean the sandpaper, and all you're doing is removing any embedded sawdust and freeing up the grit to kind of just continue your process. This right here, I'm not gonna use the actual orbital sander. I'm just gonna do this by hand and give this a nice once over here. I have my air filtration on. I really should be using a mask when I do this by hand. So do as I say, not as I do. Because who knows what the particulate is doing to me. But you can see that all I'm doing is going with the grain, and I'm just trying to get this smoothed out as nice as possible. Any little tiny rough areas or anything? I mean, I'm getting a lot of sawdust on top of here. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a lot of sawdust on there. So even though it's 220, I mean, it's doing its thing. And then, like I said, I'm just going to try kind of run those rounded edges a little bit just to make sure they're smooth. And hit the top here a little bit. I'm just giving it a once over is really all I'm doing, but I'm going with the grain. Whenever I'm doing this, it's always with the grain so that I'm not putting any scratches in here that don't belong or that aren't hidden by the grain direction itself. And then let me just do the bottom like this. Because yeah, this one also is pretty much just ready for being finished. Except for, we gotta do this, right? So each one, I now have to go and do that too. Let me get my vacuum here. And I'm just going to untangle for a second and get my brush, because this is also a nice thing to do, is to just kind of, after you've hit it with the sandpaper, just give it a little vacuum. Now, hopefully you've noticed I had this little foam pad down here. I see some people use like thin, like carpet insulation, like that you'd have under a piece of carpeting in your house or whatever. This is just from a roll of foam, whatever, I don't know what it is, cabinet foam or something like that. But I use this to protect the wood and to dampen vibrations from when I am sanding and such. And it does a pretty good job. I have a little mark right there left. All right, and let's see, we were going to go to the 120 here. The 120 pad. And we will take these over here. And I'm going to just do the same thing I did to that other one. I'm just going to smooth out these corners. The sapele is a little bit tougher wood than that maple is. But it has a tendency to splinter sometimes, so I'm always trying to be careful. Pretty much the brute is oak. I can do whatever I want to with the oak, but this stuff, not bad. Not bad. All right. Pretty good. Like I said, I just want to make it so that it's not going to damage anybody's fingers going across there and feels nice to the touch. I'll turn this around, get some fresh sandpaper on there. Get these corners. And I kind of like it when I do it like this. I mean, when it gets all done and you look at it and you can just see that there's been some hand touches. You know, it's not just all machines and such. There's some handwork that's gone into these, and I like the fact that it reflects that. You know, these aren't just pumped out in a factory, right? I make these by hand, and so the fact that they reflect a little bit of handcrafting in there is, I think, a good thing. I mean, I don't want it to look rough, but you know, if the edges aren't factory perfect or whatever, I think that's okay. All right, we vacuum this out a little bit. Alrighty, so that's done. And basically that process gets repeated over and over and over again. Let me pull up some others here. So these are the other ones, or some of the other ones, that were off camera. And this was the corners being clamped in. So I can remove these clamps now. Put all my little clamping jigs away. So I make these little L-shaped ones to accommodate for the storage, and then I can clamp across that face because I need something that pushes this with equal force into the corner. That's what those do. So just unclamp, and then these just have little blocks on the ends with little V's cut in them like this. I don't know if you can see that. There you go. So there's a little V cut in there, and that V fits in the corner here, and just gives a little bit better thing. I used to actually do, like if I do these are kind of cut to a V, because if I do the corners before I do the roundovers, they fit really nicely on those corners. So it doesn't really matter which order I do it in. Even with the rounded corners, they still work just fine. I'm gonna go over here and grab another one. I'm just gonna pull all these out. All of these still need to be sanded and have the roundovers done. There's pencil on this thing, and you know, from me making markups on it and stuff. So I still need to sand these down and then do the roundovers on the edges and then do the final sanding. All of that needs to happen. Now, it doesn't need to happen right now. So that's why I'm just taking these off right before we wrap up. And then the rest of that sanding and rounding and everything else will happen over the course of today and tomorrow and Sunday. Maybe, you know, just depends. Sometimes I just get in the groove and just get it all done. Sometimes I'll just come out here and do like one or two. This is one of the cherry bases. So this one should look really nice when it's done. It's got a lot of nice wood grain in here. It's got a few little marks I need to clean with the sandpaper, so that will take a little bit of time. I'm just throwing my little wooden jigs into their box over there so I don't lose them. But let me grab the last one. And this is one more sapele. Sapele. I really wish I knew how the correct way to pronounce that was, but I call it sapele. Sometimes sapele. I really don't know. But this is another full size with the storage. So I had a lot of this sapele wood left over and decided to go ahead and use it all up on this run. So I think I got I got three bases out of this material. I got two with the storage compartments and one with no storage compartment. And then I think I've got one of them, this one, with a logo on there, one of these long ones without a logo, and then the short one with a logo. So I try to mix it up, try to do different things. I don't want to just be cookie cutter and do the same thing over and over, even though I'm making the same product. You know, I try to mix it up so that I'm not making the exact same thing all the time. Some get logos, some don't. Some get storage compartments, some don't. Some get oak, some get sapele, some get cherry. So I try to make a variety just to make it interesting for the people who are buying. But, and yes, someone said you gotta love making tools to use tools. And I totally agree, because that's what these are. These are little tools that I use to make tools. I make stuff on my CNC machine to use. I make push blocks for my table saw on my CNC machine. I actually made, these are kind of cool too. So these are little stops that I made right here. So these are little stops. You actually put screws down in here, and then they screw into the table surface of my CNC machine. You push them up against the item that you're cutting and they hold it. But I made these on the CNC machine, so they're kind of cool too. So yeah, I like making tools, especially helper tools. Sapele is the way it's pronounced. Thank you. Somebody just said sapele. That's the way I have been saying it, but you know, someone's always there with a correction. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right. I think that's about a wrap for today. What do we got? Almost 1 o'clock. I'm going to finish sanding all of these, doing the cleaning up the handles, because like I said, these handles need to be softened up a little bit. I have 4 more that I haven't even started sanding yet. I got to sand all of those. I got to finish sanding these. These have had the first one or two. I think I've done 120 on these. I haven't done anything past that. I got to do the roundovers. I'm still set up for the roundovers with the 1/8 inch roundover bit. So I will be doing those. And then doing that final 220 sanding on there and just cleaning up any rough edges or whatever. I'll do all that after this live stream and tomorrow. And then when I come back on Monday, pretty much we'll be ready to start doing some of these different finishing projects. I think Monday, at the very least, I want to tackle this this maple base. I want to see something here real quick. I'm gonna get my naphtha here because I think I can show you what this is going to look like, which is actually really cool. Or it'll give you an idea of what it'll look like. Naphtha's right here. So let me grab my naphtha and a towel. I really like naphtha because it actually dries fairly quickly. It cleans the wood really well and it doesn't raise the grain on the wood, unlike some things will, especially water. But yeah, it's thank God for Google. He said he had to Google the way to pronounce sapele, which I probably should have done. Anyway, so the naphtha is a great, because it flashes off pretty quickly, not as fast as alcohol, but what it does is it gives you kind of an insight into what the wood will look like if you get like an oil finish on it or something. I'm gonna go to this camera right here. So you can see how the figure on this thing just pops. And when I actually hit this with a dark stain and then sand off again, it'll look even better. And then the sides have a flamey maple thing going on here. It's a little harder to see with the in the camera, but it's, I don't know if you can see the flame in there. So this thing, there you go, you can see some of that flame in there. So this thing is gonna look really cool, but I have to, like I said, this one gets like a double treatment, which takes a little longer. So, how am I handling the prices of lumber right now? It does, luckily for me, I had made a run to my lumber supplier a couple of months ago and bought a bunch of stock, which is basically what I've got now. I've got 8 of these bases in process. And I had a bunch of stock to work from. My next set of bases will probably be, you know, I will build that price increase into the price of the product. There's not much else you can do. I mean, honestly, you can't work at a loss. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. And I don't work with a huge profit margin anyway, because a lot of the stuff I do it because I enjoy it. It's not necessarily like a full-time business for me. This is just something I do for fun, but I don't do it for free, and I certainly don't want to do it for a loss. So basically, oh, you turn pins, which pins are really, I mean, the great thing about pins, well, 2 things. One, if you're buying your pin stock from a place like Woodcraft or whatever, ouch. And they get their price for their little piece of wood, and you're using exotics too, right? So it's the nice thing is though, you're working with small pieces of wood. So, geez, I've got so much wood here that could be turned into pin stocks. It's amazing because most of my cutoffs are like pin size stuff. So I do have a small lathe that I have turned pins in the past for gifts and things like that, and it's really fun. My brother has he's got a big lathe, and he does a lot of turning and stuff. And for him, finding wood is harder because he does bowls and such. So that's really hard to find really nice pieces of wood. Like I've gone into the Woodcraft and you look in their wood supply stuff, especially like their turning blanks or whatever, and they've got these exotics and stuff, but you're talking like, you know, for a piece of like, I don't know, 9-inch by 3 or 4-inch thick piece of wood, and it's like $45, right? And it's like, you got to pull a good profit margin out of that to really get it worth your while. Pins, on the other hand, the nice thing about pins, the hardware really hasn't gone up, right? So you've got kits that you can get. For those who don't know about pins, you basically buy the mechanical bits in pieces or kits to assemble, and then you create the front barrel and back barrel of the pen, or however it's going to be configured, out of your own wood. And so you can get creative and use wood that you find out of your lumber pile, or you can go and buy exotic woods. So I think it's a little easier for you to control your price of how much you're getting. But then again, you probably get better prices for exotic blanks. Like I have some like Babinga and stuff like that I'm saving for, I don't know what, something special. I did do some pen blanks out of it though, and it looks amazing. But yeah, buying surfaced, ready to roll Babinga blanks probably costs about a third as much as my large board did. So they get their prices for it, no doubt. But yeah, for me, the biggest prices increases I've seen are in white oak. Definitely, white oak is almost as expensive as walnut now. Walnut really hadn't gone up that much. I think the more popular the wood is, like if you want to go buy 2x4s now, they're like basically doubled in price, I think. A lot of the construction grade lumber has gone up, and that is largely in part to the construction industry trying to ramp up and needing more supplies and such. So I think that hasn't affected my prices too much, but I have seen some of the stuff like things that cabinet makers use a lot of, like cherry has gone up. The white oak, especially the quarter sawn white oak, has gone way up. Some of the more exotic stuff that I use, not necessarily. Sapele was kind of holding still. Yeah, it depends on the wood really. So I can sort of keep it down to price, and because I stain my wood, it doesn't have to be, I don't need, like I'm not working on all walnut or things like that. So I can still keep my prices fairly low, but I have raised my prices a little bit just to deal with that. So, all right, hey, thanks for stopping in. I appreciate it. Yeah, come back, check out what I do with the staining and stuff. And that's a good spot, 1 o'clock. Let's go ahead and wrap up for the rest of us. And we're gonna finish these things out. Hopefully next week we'll get these done. I have some staining to do. Like I said, once they're stained, we'll do a different project after these are stained because I need to let them cure, and then I have to hit them with the lacquer. So, this is like the best part. The stain is where they come alive. I mean, it really is. It's when it's the part that I hate doing, but it's the thing that brings it all to life and makes them look beautiful. And so it's kind of exciting and pain in the butt at the same time. So anyway, come back and join me next week. I'm here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I stream on Twitch and Facebook and YouTube. All the socials are down here at the bottom. You can find them in the info, like under the About page on Twitch, or in the description in Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for stopping in if you did. If you're watching this at a later time, I really appreciate it. If you can hit the subscribe or follow or like or whatever is appropriate, that'd be cool too. Otherwise, have a great Friday, and I will see you back in the shop on Monday. Take care, I think, if I can find my bot. There it is.